everyone. I am David Kreller with the Wichita State University Small Business Development Center, and I am joined today with Al Eichelberger of the Capital Access Center of the Kansas Small Business Development Center. Good morning, Al.
Good morning.
Good to see you, and thank you so much for joining us. I've known Al we've known each other for many years, measured actually in decades, if you go back far enough. Al is the expert with one of the experts with the Small Business Development Center on financial transactions. And we're visiting today about financing options for business sales, business transactions. And this is leading up to the Business Transitions Conference that will occur on September the 26th at the Metropolitan Complex at Wichita State University. That's just north of campus. For registration information, you can contact us at 316-978-3193 or find us through the website at wichita.edu/workshops. With that, Al, tell us a little bit about financing transactions. If somebody is wanting to purchase a business, what ideas, what solutions are available? What ideas do you have?
Well, there's lots of options out there for financing transactions, and there's lots of deal structures. Just a little bit of background about me. I was a prior commercial lender. I was a prior senior credit officer and a prior bank president. So in running and managing a bank, we had to know how to help our clients in the best way possible to make them successful. So there's lots of different options. There's lots of different deal structures, and all of them can be twisted and turned just a little bit. But, you know, when you're looking at the typical deals, a lot of them have, some of them are typically cash. Some of them will put the majority of cash. Usually you're using your own cash, or sometimes there's family and friends. And usually that's a combination of your cash and your family or friends' cash and putting a transaction together. So you kind of have to make sure that everything's put together so that when they want to exit, there's an exit strategy to make that happen. There's also a stock sale. So that's been done. Actually did that when we started a new bank. So we had cash from investors. We put our cash in. We had investors put cash in. And you want to make sure that you, as the owner of the company, can control what's going on. You know, always remember 51% is always king. And you always want to have a buyout agreement with your shareholders. And so that's really important to have that structure defined by an attorney and reviewed by you, and we can help you review that. And so that's very important when you use stock sale from cash from investors. There's also crowdfunding. We are aware of specialists out there that can help you solicit your community in your area to help raise funds for you. And speaking of that, there's also an interesting part that I've actually seen two breweries do. Is called micro lending contracts. Those are very, very interesting and can really help a lot of people be able to put cash together and to be able to have an exit strategy to buy out those contracts. Then there's the standard bank loan, which is called a conventional loan. And most of that is you're going to have either 20 to 25% cash equity going into the project. Usually, sometimes there can be a seller carryback on that, but a lot of times there's not. And then there's also a bank loan called SBA financing. And they have a standard operating agreement with SBA that they loan the money, not SBA, so that there's usually cash equity going in that is typically 10%. And there's also sometimes there's a seller carryback on some of that equity too, which can defer capital gains. And then there's also can be a contract where you have a buyer and a seller, no bank involved at all, and negotiate a contract, and we can help you with that. We've seen lots of those transactions. And usually on the most of that, we just did a transaction with a father-son where he didn't want all his cash up front. He wanted to delay that cash. And so it helps the seller delay those capital gains over several years. And so that's really helpful when you're talking about taxes, when you're talking to your accountant, very important. Then there's private equity funds. And those private equity funds, there's lots of money out there on the shelf that people are looking to invest. And they want to invest and they want a return. And so what you want to usually do is there's usually, they'll bring the equity to the table, but at the end of the day, there's a strategy to exit, for them to exit and to get cash back out so that you can have a majority share of that business. Then there's sometimes where there's buyers and sellers, they just can't figure out the price of the transaction. And so the buyer wants this, the seller wants this, they can't figure it out. So they employ a different strategy. And that strategy is that you have, it's really based on performance. So you enter into an agreement. If the company performs, the seller gets payment on specific performance targets. That is super helpful to make sure that the buyer's not overpaying and that the seller typically stays involved some indirectly and helps the seller gain those revenues and those sales. And so those are some of the things that we're doing to help people. We have all those tools in our toolbox that are available to clients through the KSBDC, WSU, and we were here all the time to make sure that we can be supportive to you. So please give us a call.
Very, very interesting stuff. One of the things that we'll be working with at the conference is just not the traditional buying and selling of Main Street businesses, but also family transition from one generation to another. You might comment just a little bit in terms of maybe Main Street businesses, maybe more traditional businesses as we think of them. Is there a more common type of financing or sales structure that you would see versus others? What might be the more common business transaction?
A lot of times you're going to see, depending on the sale price and what the value of that is, usually there's a third-party independent valuation done between the buyer and the seller to determine that price, because sellers have a value that they want to get out of their business to convert their long-term asset into cash for them to retire on. And the buyer's wanting to know that he's not overpaying. So a lot of times there's going to be a value done on that. And then from that, bankers and people can either do it internally, do it financing by the buyer and the seller, or through the bank. And just to remember, this is really important. A lot of people are concerned about paying too high of a price. There's not enough assets. And so banks deploy SBA. SBA likes to loan funds, and they guarantee the funds to the bankers at a percentage from typically 80 up. And that way that'll help them. And usually there's less down, but they're more concerned about cash flow of the business than the assets of the business. If you use a conventional loan and the bank does not utilize SBA, it's going to be typically the 20 to 25% equity going into it, because they're taking the full risk themselves without the SBA guarantee.
That's a really good point. As I've encountered, there's a lot of people that believe that SBA makes those loans, and other than emergency disaster relief type loans,
exactly,
SBA is simply guaranteeing the loans in lieu of a larger down payment at the bank. Is that correct?
Correct. Typically, and usually SBA requires the 10% equity go into it. SBA recently, in May of this year, changed their strategy on the 10% down. Sometimes the seller can do a 10% carryback on that and a full standby on that note until the note matures or is paid off, and then the seller gets his money at that time. So there's always ways to make it work. So that, in essence, is 100% financing.
Yeah. Going through all those different ideas and strategies, it really sounds like there's a option for everything out there and trying to get a business sale, a business transaction done. It's just knowing, is the term you used, what tools you have in the toolbox and using the right.
And very interesting today, we have a lot of people on Main Street today that are buying businesses or startup businesses that are using gap financing. We also have that tool available to us. So say you start a new business and you only have $5,000 and you're paying $150,000 for a business. Depending on the cash flow, how it works out, typically we can get a bank to finance a portion of it, and the gap, your cash goes into it as an investor, as a startup, and also the gap financing's out there at a lower rate. Typically, it's 4% for 5 years and 6% fixed for 10 years. So that gap financing is really making a difference for small business owners today.
That is interesting. That is interesting. A lot of good stuff. Again, we encourage, if you're looking at buying or selling your business here in the next foreseeable future, the Business Transitions Conference is being held on September the 26th at the Metropolitan Complex, which is just north of campus at Wichita State University. For more information, call us at 316-978-3193, or you can find information on our website at wichita.edu/workshops. Again, Al, thank you so much for joining us today to share this information. We look forward to seeing everyone in September. Thank you, Al.
Thank you, David. Have a great day.
Thanks.